It's now my great pleasure to welcome back to our summits, our live summits, and hybrid, of course. And we have an audience out there in the ether watching from their homes and offices. I'm very happy to introduce the next session, which is Building Tourism Resilience by Expanding Air Connectivity. And Rajan Datar, presenter and broadcaster with the BBC, will be here to moderate that session. So I hand over now to Rajan. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. Fantastic to be in my home city with physical people near me and having this conference at what is a very, very crucial time, I would say, in the history of travel, really. It's absolutely critical. And this particular topic that we're addressing today is something that I think will be integral to how we move forward. So really, we're talking about how air connectivity is vital, not only to support tourism, but also to maintain key economic flows, such as trade and investments. However, in certain geographical regions, the extent of air connectivity depends on the size of the domestic aviation market, and especially the country's population. So how can air connectivity be then expanded? So I have two guests to talk about this. My first guest is perhaps one of the world's longest serving and certainly well-known tourism ministers. I've encountered him several times, and he's a staunch champion for the little guy in this often harsh industry. The small island destinations, and the little guy who basically works in taxis and tries to make a living, maybe in a market stall or whatever. So he supports them. He's also co-chair of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Centre, which we'll hear about too. So can I welcome on stage, please, the Honourable Edmund Bartlett. How are you? You've been busy, haven't you? I'm just going to go to my second guest in a second, but just very quickly, you've been busy. You've been zooming around the world, doing stuff.
The last 2 weeks have been a little hectic. Spent a bit of time in the Middle East. We think, from my end of the world, that COVID has created new market opportunities, and that the Middle East is, in fact, an interesting oyster. And we're looking at it.
We're going to talk about that very subject in a second, because that's exactly what you're up to. We've also got, and it's my great pleasure to welcome online, the CEO of Flydubai. I hope we can bring him up online. Ghaith. Are you there? Hello, how are you?
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. And you have been quite busy recently, haven't you? You've got these new deals to Central Europe, is that right? Budapest and Warsaw?
Yes, in the United Arab Emirates, and especially in Dubai, we have been blessed to have a visionary government that took care of the people and the resident and the whole industry, to the extent that I can state for in your conference here that Dubai tourism business is back on track. We are now seeing numbers better even than pre-COVID. And if we start talking about that, we need to have plenty of time to explain why. But it is as simple as this. We follow the leader, and our leadership has done a job where everybody now in the country work in a certain restriction, because you have to follow certain rules, but everybody feel very comfortable. The volume of the business, as I said, higher than ever before COVID, and it's all because of the sightful of our government.
Fantastic.
So yes.
Sorry to interrupt. We're going to come back to Flydubai and what it's up to in a moment. I just want to start with you, Edmund, and really Jamaica, because it came up just now in the conversation as well. You are seen as a leader, clearly, in this whole thing. Just tell me, in terms of, I've read figures about how islands particularly are so dependent on tourism. In some islands, 90%. I think Jamaica's 54%, around that. Yeah. So, what's the state of play right now with tourism to Jamaica? Just tell me that much.
Well, we're seeing a rebound, and we're experiencing a V-shaped recovery. And that is very special because of how we have managed the pandemic so far. The fact that very early in the day we understood what disruptions do to the tourism industry. In the last 50 years, as you know, we've had 4.
Yeah.
But nothing like this pandemic, of course, because this one affected all the world simultaneously. Unprecedented in Anthropocene Earth, if you ask me. And so it invited a response that we didn't even know about. But the good news is that we had established this Resilience and Crisis Management Center 2 years prior, almost a little touch of clairvoyance. And thanks to Dr. Talib Rafai, who is here, he was a really driver force behind establishing that center, and he and I have worked closely in nurturing it. So we understood. I came back from China in December of 2019, and then we heard the story. So immediately we established a task force to look at the possibility of that disruption. And then by March, when the World Health Organization announced that you had a global pandemic, we were ready to get the recovery team established. So we got hold of WTTC immediately with regards to a set of protocols. We brought in a consultant from Pricewaterhouse and worked with our tourism development company. And in a month, we hammered out a 385-page document with 22 key touch points for managing something that we were all just learning about. But since science were telling us some things, we paid attention. If it said that it's a virus, that human is the vector, that it doesn't happen unless you transmit it, then what do you do to prevent it? So we learned all of that. And then we'll start to learn about social distancing and sanitation. And then we went into technologies. How do you enable these things to happen and to be able to have touchless sanitary arrangements that enabled individuals to not necessarily be contact with each other, but achieve the level of control that is required. So all of that we did, but we then went into training. So having established the protocols, we went into training our workers. So Jamaica, like all of the world, did the shutdown strategy. That's something that was short-lived, thank God. But in March, we closed our borders. And during the period of that closure, we moved from 4.5 million visitors to 0 visitors. We had up to 60, 70 flights a week from certain airlines. There was silence in the air. Airports closed. Borders closed. 130,000 people out of a job. So we decided to use technology to great effect. And we started to train, and we trained 20,000 workers online during that period. And the good news is that we discovered that there was a way that we could defeat COVID and to keep tourism going. So we established something called the Resilient Corridor, a geographical area in Jamaica along our north coast that, fortunately for us, the geography was in our favor, and there's a highway that ran along that stretch. And the good news is that the beaches are all along that stretch. So 85% of the tourism values were within that area. Although Julia mentioned about the cordon sanitaire. Almost, but not quite. Because within that space were were attractions, and that employed people. There were restaurants, and that employed people. And we were able to train and enable the transportation subsector to also happen. So people were able to move freely along the corridor and be transported from one area to the other. So that's how we were able to then incrementally move the numbers up, and then we established controls at the airport, as you would imagine, because you had to work with health, and health is always interested in tracing, tracking, and enabling management of the virus itself. So the infection levels you had to watch carefully. Good news, within the corridor, record low infection, 0.5% infection, while the rest of the country was running up to 45%. Within that corridor, you had 0.5%. So it tells you that with innovation, with application, and with appreciation of what resilience building is, you could develop a bubble that enabled tourism to happen, and fortunately, travel to also happen, and the economy to be kept alive.
Okay, let's talk then specifically about air connectivity, because I think one of the lessons, in a sense, that the pandemic and possibly previous crises have shown is the kind of dependency of island economies on tourism is obviously huge. And you have traditionally relied on North America and Europe especially, and the UK, I think, for tourism. And there's a danger there, isn't there? Over-reliance on certain markets. So the idea now is to create wider networks, to create more connectivity with Jamaica and other parts of the world. So can you tell me a little bit about that? What's happening there?
So, well, small economies such as ours, and you know that I live in the most tourism-dependent region on earth, the Caribbean, where we have dependency levels ranging, GDP dependency, from 95% down to lowest, I think, is 7%, and that's Trinidad and Tobago because they have oil.
Right.
And now Guyana because they have oil also. But we have countries in the Caribbean, like Antigua and Barbuda, and so I could call it Barbados and ourselves, that have high levels. In our case in Jamaica, it's actually 34% GDP dependence. So we know what it is to be affected when there are disruptions. We know also what it is to be affected by air connectivity that goes awry. We don't swim to our destinations, you know? Right, so we need airlines. And so we partner with airlines. And most of us have no capacity to even own a proper, you know.
Yeah.
So we have to rely on our air partners. And so we've spent a lot of time working with the large airlines in North America. And North America for us is definitely the market. There's no question about that. Its size allows us to penetrate it well. The connectivity for us is good.
Yep.
In the case of Jamaica, we are the most connected destination in the Caribbean. We have access to more than 200 gateways in the United States. Then we have Canada and, of course, Europe. But to your point, the rest of the world is also open. And now we're looking at the Middle East. I spent 2 weeks in the Middle East. I was in Dubai for a week. Of course, there's the Expo, and we capitalize on that. Jamaica has a nice pavilion there that the media say we're the coolest pavilion, and for good reasons.
And you struck a deal, didn't you not, with Emirates? Is that right?
Well, we're working. I don't want to say too much on that yet, but we're working with them. We had great meetings, and we're looking forward to something happening there. But to the point of how the supply chain has been upended by COVID. And when you were talking to airlines now, we're finding that the demand has gone beyond their capacity to respond. So yes, they want to fly, but they don't have pilots, they don't have air stewardesses, they don't have enough handlers at the airport, because what has happened is that the skills have gone elsewhere. And to build back that skill level within the short time is a huge problem, because the specialized skills training is required, and we don't have the necessary tools to get that done within the time frame based on the demand that is now there. So we are going to see a slowing of the recovery process because air connectivity is being affected significantly by this human factor. And I had a discussion earlier with one of your friends, Richard Quest, and we were talking about that very problem. That, you know, the supply chain disruption, a lot of times we think about in terms of gadgetry and equipment, you know, but it is human. It is a human impact that is the bigger problem, and we have to consider that.
Okay. Ghaith, we just talked about your former employer, I think, Emirates. But tell me about Flydubai, and over 90 countries, I think you now go to. You've been going since 2008. So in this drive that Edmund is talking about creating greater air connectivity, do you feel that Flydubai can be central to that?
Well, we've been flying since 2009. And yes, I mean, we're very lucky, you know, to be in this part of the world where tourism is an integral part of the whole economic cycle, and transportation is very important because, you know, in the United Arab Emirates, you know, 90% of our population come from over 200 different countries. Our economy is as such a size that it's required all these people from all over the world to come and work here. So for us, we're in a very fortunate situation where tourism is important, yet transportation is also very important. And that's why an airline in our region is just so important. I just wanted to touch, and of course, Flydubai has an integral part of the development of tourism over the last 12 years here in our region. We must have opened, since we started, over 70 to 90 destinations. They were not properly served before Flydubai started. So we focus on some of the major market, but a lot of the secondary market. And just to throw a number, in this current period, in Flydubai, this year alone, we started flying to 16 new destinations. Because when we looked at the demand curve and where the business is going to go and where it's going to come from, we had to come out with a new destination for the summer, for the previous winter, and for the current winter, because we understand that what is going to be the main driver. But I wanted just to go back to His Excellency the Minister, because I think, first of all, I congratulate His Excellency on a very nice plan to deal with COVID. That is a textbook how it should be done. Congratulations and well done. And also he touched on a very important point, because here we are talking about transport and its relationship to tourism, but its relationship of doing business. You know, this business about the whole world has closed down. If it was not for transportation in airplanes, cargo, we would not have seen so much goods transported throughout the world, yet for medical reason or for the purpose of getting faster there, because the ships, maybe it will take so long. So cargo on airplane played a big part. But what is, for recovery now, I mean, one of the issues that we have is that the manpower. And in our region, the problem with manpower is trying to get people to work, especially, you know, because we have people from all over the world. We are, again, very, very, very lucky, because we started the opening of our economy at least a year ago, or at least 10 months ago. So we've been ramping up our operation. Our hotels are fully full now, because they have full number of staff. But still, there are certain countries that are still closing their borders. Because of this COVID, they are not allowing enough flights to come, and this is going to delay recovery, because, you know, you need to fly people to come from other places to start doing the job on the ground needed to kickstart any sector in the economy. And since we are talking about tourism here, it's a very, very unique problem, and we have to start taking off this sort of restriction, at least in our part of the world. There is still a lot of restriction about flights, and I think this will definitely delay the recovery, because if people cannot fly, if boat cannot fly, if airline cannot have their schedule back as it used to be, this will harm the recovery.
I need to raise something, though, that I think everyone will be thinking about. It's kind of the elephant in the room, and I'm sure you can address this. It's the flying elephant in the room, actually. It's about, COP26 is going on right now. We have, aviation is the fastest growing source of carbon emissions. What are you doing to address that? Because people will be asking you that question, won't they?
Well, we are, of course, as in Flydubai, we are one of the most youngest airline in the world. We fly the youngest fleet in the world. Our average aircraft age must be below 4 or 3.5 years. So we constantly change and improve our aircrafts, so that the aircraft that we use hopefully burn less fuel. We are in contacts and with the leaders in the industry as far as trying to reduce the effect of flying. And we are always have part of our objective is to always be in the front when it comes to changes that we have to do to reduce the effect of flying on the environment, because we only have one environment. If that goes away, we all also go with it. And so, thank you.
No, and is the aim then, just to talk between you, and this is the last question I've got time for, to create a situation where you can have regular traffic coming from the Middle East to Jamaica and the Caribbean?
Right. And I think that this is the way in which, for example, we could reduce the carbon emissions because we have larger, more efficient equipment carrying more people. So the ratio is less. And then we develop special strategies for multi-destination arrangements. And I think that this is one of the things that COVID is teaching us. It's saying, all right, you start again, but you can start by cooperating, by collaborating, by destinations coming together instead of compete, co-pete. So we get a nice new word.
So within your context,
co-petition.
Within your context, places like Mexico, the other Caribbean.
Mexico, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Panama, and Cuba, of course, as a 5 to begin with. And that represents about 60 million people. So you have a critical mass. And we have perhaps about 300,000 rooms within those countries. So here is an opportunity for us to look at rationalizing protocols, to look at travel requirements and border requirements, to look at visa facilitation and all of those, and then to create a product with a price and a package that our partners can find affordable. And then we move. So the airlines will be interested, the tour operators will be interested, the hoteliers will be interested, and the economies of the region will be lifted.
Very good. Gentlemen, I'm short of time. I've got to end, in fact. And I'm just going to say that, Edmund, you're going to join us for another panel in 10 minutes.
Yes.
Ghaith, thank you so much for joining us online from Dubai, and good luck with Flydubai.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been told to keep going. Wow, that's unusual when you look at that. Let's talk about this then. Let's talk about when Flydubai attempts to widen its network. What's the process that you have to go through if you want to fly to a different country? Just explain it, because a lot of people don't understand how it works. What are the hurdles, and how can you do it? How do you do it?
Unfortunately, we live in a world that you guys don't recognize, basically, because if you are in Europe or if you are in America, you have one economy, where, one rules as far as where you can fly is applied because it's all open sky. And you have one customer, because if you draw a picture of the customer, they all have the same needs. In our region, we have borders, horrible things that exist, and that's why people need visa. And sometimes people who are in your country, who are employed and needs to go to a third country from your country, need even more than via visa. So it's extremely restricted. So for us, we have been blessed, as I said, the tourism and the trading is part of our business here for a long, long time. So we have a lots of flexibility, lots of very positive treaties where we can go to places without any restriction. And because of the success of the United Arab Emirates and because of the success of Dubai, everybody wants to allow you in. Because if you are connected to Dubai, the biggest hub in the world, that will ease transportation. So basically, we first of all recognize which countries have a bilateral arrangement where we can fly. Then we look at the business and we said, okay, for example, a long time ago, we used to look around and said, any country or any city that has over a million inhabitants and they don't fly to, there's no flight to Dubai, we can actually stimulate the business by putting a flight to the city. And then we have to do our homework, of course, make sure that we partner with the right people on the ground, we give enough notice, we promote it, and then when we open it, they come. This whole thing about build it, they come. In Dubai, we reached to a situation where we said, you fly it, they will come.